We'll now take a look at the work of Bandura, whom you've read about, and we'll talk specifically about self-efficacy and self-regulation as two more cognitive styles that we're discussing in this chapter. And a quote, "It is our duty as human beings to proceed as though limits of our capabilities do not exist." So here we are gaining the courage again to move forward and optimize our potential. So a little bit about Bandura. You've already read some about him. Of course, he was born in Canada as the baby of the family, and he worked, interestingly, on some pretty hard labor up in the Yukon to prevent the highway from sinking, so he probably had a good sense of self-efficacy there. He was not initially interested in psychology, but his interest was piqued in a course he happened to take, and that led him to proceed for his bachelor's degree and eventually his master's and PhD. He worked at Stanford out in California, a very well-respected university still, and social learning theory is what we're talking about indirectly here in relation to self-regulation as the second part of this lecture, and then also self-efficacy. And this last comment, his work was notable because it emerged in a behaviorist time frame. Why this is important is because at the time, Skinner was really quite dominant. Skinner and the behaviorist paradigm, that is, we are just little behaving robots responding to reinforcers in our environment. And so he was adding this element of cognition, and that's what gives him such a high level of respect in the broader world of psychology, taking us in a new direction related to cognition or thought. The self-efficacy scale is one that you will be taking, so I won't go through this just now. We will consider this last question, though, whether it's the same as confidence or optimism or expectancy. So we'll kind of try to tease out what we mean by self-efficacy. And so let's think then about this little diagram, and we'll talk about it in terms of efficacy expectations versus outcome expectations. And efficacy kind of means like the effectiveness of one's individual actions, the effectiveness of anything, and self-efficacy referring specifically to the belief in the effectiveness, we can say, of one's individual actions, or quoted here, the belief that one can organize and execute actions to deal with situations. And so we can just think of the distinction between efficacy and outcome expectations in this diagram. So we have a person, the person engages in a behavior, the behavior has an outcome. The efficacy expectations are the belief that you could have the skills to engage in the behavior, whereas outcome expectations is the belief that a good consequence will come from your behavior. And so you can sort of see the distinction there, maybe related a little bit to efficacy is something that you have control over, whereas outcome isn't. And so let me even clarify that some more. Efficacy is more akin to confidence in your ability rather than confidence that a good result is going to come. So again, we have that definition. We do abbreviate this SE for diagrammatic purposes, not the same as outcome expectation, and it is changeable through learning. So if you don't believe yourself to be efficacious at this juncture, that is something that you can learn through your experiences. And so what are some of these characteristics of people with low and high self-efficacy? So if you have low self-efficacy, you don't believe that you have the ability to perform what's needed, then you might become discouraged easily and give up. If you do have high self-efficacy, you believe you have the ability to develop the skills that are needed, then you'll have better performance, better effort, persistence, wiser health decisions, things like the condom use. We mentioned this earlier in another context. You're better able to control your experience of pain and better able to defend yourself. And you can see this is really a wide range of things that are better in people with high self-efficacy. And the reason is because self-efficacy doesn't pertain to any particular skill or task. It pertains to like your overall belief that you can pull up what you need when it's needed. So whatever situation you're faced with, you're pretty sure you're going to be able to develop the skills to navigate it. Where do we get self-efficacy? We come from 4 main sources according to Bandura. So first off, enactive mastery is a complicated way of saying we do things and we find out that we can do them well through our own experience. We enact our own lives and we find that we can master things. Secondly, vicarious experience. We look at others and see that maybe someone who didn't think they could do a speech, but they stand up and do it, and we can observe that, and that becomes a model for us. Next, we can develop this through verbal persuasion, like encouragement, our parents convincing us that, oh, you definitely can do this. I am so confident in you. Others having confidence in us and persuading us of our own ability. And then physiological arousal, being up to it from an emotional perspective, keeping our body not too aroused and not under aroused, just being at the right level to be able to achieve those skills. All of those components contribute to self-efficacy, which then leads to good behavior. And by that, I don't mean like obeying exactly. I just mean doing well at the things that you need to do. Collective efficacy is another component of that, and this is the belief in your group, in addition, hopefully, to your belief in yourself as an individual. And so we can define it as a group's shared belief in its ability to organize and execute courses of action to accomplish shared goals. And when you think about this, you maybe think about a sports team. If you've ever played on a team, do you believe in your team? Do you believe your team can pull it off? And this often makes a really big difference. Or if you have been involved in protests or taken an active stand on some position, once you get that group together, do you believe that you are empowered to make things happen? That's collective efficacy. People in the military, this is life and death, and they really have to believe in the effectiveness of their military unit in order to achieve what they want to. And we might take it to a really simple level of a group presentation. If you're in a group, it can be really hard to do a speech as an individual. It can be nerve-wracking. I know that for me, it's terribly nerve-wracking. You wouldn't believe this, but because I'm always talking now, but as a young person, all the way up until my mid-20s, I could not speak in front of a group. It was terrifying, and I couldn't even get through speech class in college. I dropped it a number of times because it was so terrifying to me. But I found that when I was in my master's program and I had to do quite a lot of public speaking, that having just someone else up there, like if my professor and I were co-presenting, even if I was the lead and even if I was the one with the knowledge, just having up there, believing in us that together we'd be able to answer all the questions and address what was needed, I could develop the confidence through this collective efficacy. And this depends on your group. How much have you pulled together? And here, once again, you have these 4 components that contribute also to collective efficacy, your experience of success with that group. So here's a journal possibility for you. You can think about a situation that you maybe had to develop a new skill, like you got a new job maybe, something you never did before. Did you believe yourself to be competent to develop the skill? It's always awkward at first, but the belief that you can do what is needed is what gives you these successes. And then you can also think back to how you got these beliefs. What kind of responses or encouragement did you get from those around you? What did you observe in those around you? So there's a good thing to think about as you get to know yourself better. We move on then to self-regulation. Regulations are, of course, rules, and so we're looking at rules we make for ourselves. So self-regulation is setting rules for oneself and abiding by those rules without anyone else telling us we have to. No pressure from the outside or interference from the outside. We're setting and abiding by those rules. And those can be applicable, and this next will be my take, not necessarily Bandura's, but those are certainly applicable to our actions, the things that we do in the physical world. And these things can be both directed positive actions, like setting and meeting goals, and abstaining from harmful actions, like violating the law. And this is mostly what our legal system deals with, our actions. We also need to regulate our words. In fact, some might say that regulating our words is even more important than regulating our actions, because our words belie our underlying intentions very often. And this can be a kind of a nuanced thing. But we're relating this back to the wisdom of Wally Brown from our previous class and the words of the Dalai Lama, saying that our words stem from our thoughts, and our thoughts are the roots of all of our actions. And so those are our habits, and those become us. And as we mentioned in class, we are not, as humans, able to prevent thoughts from arising. They're going to arise, whether we request them to arise or not. We can't control that, but we can control how much attention we give them. And so if a thought arises that is not a thought in alignment with the person you are or the person you prefer to be, then you can move on from that thought. You can allow that thought to pass by and move on to a more favorable framework. Now, when Bandura first presents this idea, he suggests this idea of disequilibrium. And so let's just look at this a moment. So equilibrium is balance. We might call it akin to homeostasis. That is, say, for example, your body keeping itself at an ideal temperature and trying to stay in that middle road balance. You may also have recalled this phrase from Piaget's work. He talks about disequilibrium as being a feeling that we have of being off balance when there is a goal, when there is something that we are learning that's not quite comfortable yet, like we've just had some new information that doesn't fit into our existing schema. That's also a type of disequilibrium. What we're talking about here in Bandura's work is an imbalance between our goals and our achievements. That is to say, there's a goal out there that we're trying to reach. And this kind of disequilibrium is needed for motivation. If we didn't have a goal, we wouldn't have that much reason for maybe getting up in the morning. We might feel a lack of purpose, and maybe even feel a little bit depressed. Maybe people feel this a little bit when they're retired. This sort of an equilibrium where they don't have any goals that are that they haven't yet achieved. And so we can strive for these reactively. That is, we have a goal that's far away from us. The gap between our goal and our achievement is too large. Well, we're going to react to that, and we're going to either strive hard toward that goal or give up on that goal and choose an easier goal. But we react to that distance between our goals and our achievements. And secondly, we could do this proactively. If we've closed the gap, we don't have any goal, the gap between our goal and our achievements is too narrow, then we'll probably set a new goal. And sometimes you see this in people who are retired. They take up a new hobby or learn something new or get involved in something else. As humans on this earth, we usually need to have these goals. And let's think, you're looking at this quote on the side, discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. That's where our self-regulation comes in. So what factors affect our ability to self-regulate? Well, first off, there are external factors, like we have external factors like the learning that we've had around us. And these kind of learning provides standards for assessing how well we're doing and guiding us to what should and shouldn't be done in our world. We learn both through our direct experience that we looked at just in an earlier slide, and our mastery. And we also learn vicariously by observing others' experiences, and you can associate Bandura with a Bobo doll, which you'll be seeing in a separate video. They also provide a means of reinforcement, environmental support, resources, funds for actions desired by society. So if you're getting paid well to do a certain job, you're going to regulate your behavior in order to do that job. Now, we do give ourselves self-rewards. You right now hopefully getting some reward for doing your schoolwork, and that might be the grades you get at the end of the semester, or getting a good job, or graduating. All of those are part of the external rewards. Along the way, I hope you give yourself some small rewards along the way, like taking a nice rest after your homework is done, or celebrating the end of, completing a good exam or something like that. And these external rewards, the approval of society reinforcing our behaviors, these justify these little self-rewards we give ourselves along the way. So following up on those external factors, the ones we're really looking at most closely in this class are these internal factors, and we can think of 3 internal factors affecting self-regulation. The first, self-observation. How are we doing with monitoring relevant aspects of our performance or our behavior? And I noticed that we put relevant because part of this process of self-monitoring is determined by what it is that we keep track of in our own behavior. Do we keep track of our thoughts? Do we keep track of our words? Do we keep track of harms to the environment or only harms to other people? Do we keep track of our consumerism, how much we buy, or how much our decisions about products have a potential impact on the environment? So all of these are often determined by external values, at least at first. Secondly, there's a process of judgment. We determine the worth of our own actions or the rightness of our own actions according to our personal standards. And these personal standards are just judgments that are not based on comparisons at all. Like if we have, for example, we all differ in our abilities, just still looking at A here, we all differ in our abilities to, say, navigate social situations. And if you have a background being very, very shy and quiet, and then you find that you were able to go to a gathering or host a party and you got through it, that might be a big accomplishment for you. It's not based on a comparison to someone who doesn't share that same particular challenge. So personal standards. But secondly, and more commonly, we judge our behaviors according to our peers. So we look at who's appropriate. So you're going to judge your own performance on an academic paper according to how your other undergraduates are doing, or according to how your family members did. We determine relevant peers and we make comparisons that way and determine how we're doing. Also then, the value, going on to C, I don't have these phased in. Also then, how much do we value about the activity? So if you don't really care about your academic performance, then you're probably not going to monitor or regulate your own behavior around that particular thing. But if you value your academic performance, then that's going to become part of your ability to regulate your behavior around that performance. And then finally, our attributions, the explanations we give for these performance. If we are taking credit, if we worked hard to achieve something, that's going to elicit a different judgment than if we felt that it just came to us for free, it didn't have too much to do with us. And then finally, we react to our own behaviors based on how they measure up to our standards. So we respond well, we feel good, do more of that thing, or we respond badly, we feel maybe shame or guilt or a negative judgment on the self. And hopefully we do self-reinforce, or that is, reward ourselves when we approve of our own performance. So it's a little complex, nuanced interaction of external and internal values and rewards. So moral agency is the last component that affects our ability to self-regulate, and that is, do we act on our own moral standards? And so doing the right thing. All right, we all know what's right and wrong, and we might think of it as doing the right thing even when nobody's looking. And it can include such things, usually 2 components: avoiding harm to others and proactively helping others. These are generally what human beings see as doing the right thing. Of course, there's a lot of latitude in those 2 broad prescriptives. So we selectively engage them or selectively activate them. So we have to, we can have all the moral beliefs that we want, but it's what we do that determines whether we've actually regulated our behavior. And so what causes us to act or fail to act on our own moral beliefs? And we do, all of us, And we see other people do reprehensible things all the time, but we know that most people believe these two things, avoiding harm to others and proactively helping others. So how do we get around this doing lousy things that are inconsistent? How come people fail in self-regulation? By acting in ways that violate their own ethical standards. And we do some little mental trickery on ourselves. First off, we disengage moral control. That is to say, we imagine that that it's justified. We can label someone as deserving what's happened, or we can do what Bandura calls palliative comparison. Say, that person's a lot worse than I am. I don't cheat nearly as much as that guy does, right? So we disengage our moral control in that way, a little game we play with ourselves. We also minimize or ignore the consequences of the reprehensible action. So we imagine that the thing that we've done that's wrong isn't really so bad. It's not really harming anyone. If I take this, this small thing from this store, there really isn't much harm. Or if I take this small thing and the store is just a big chain, it doesn't really matter. That kind of thing, ignoring the consequences or minimizing them. And then dehumanizing or blaming the victim. And so, I just gave an example of dehumanizing the victim. Let's say the victim is a big corporation and you just took something from the store, or you just downloaded somebody's book when you found it for free on the web, or someone's music, you kind of got it from the black space so the artist doesn't get paid. Well, you've just dehumanized them. When we do these things, when it's inside a machine, that's very easy to do. We also see this in real life, though. I think a little bit, perhaps, of what's happening to the people who have been shipped out of our country is we have dehumanized them, too. We've considered them to be what we define as gang members, which takes away their humanity. And if we dial back a couple decades, we'll probably find them as young boys growing up in a very rough neighborhood where there was no choice but to join a gang or get stomped on. And so we dehumanize them when we fail to consider the breadth of the experience that led them to be as they were. Or we can blame the victim. We see this in domestic abuse situations. She drove me to it. She's the one who's always doing this that caused me to do that. It wasn't my fault. So we play mental games with ourselves, and all of us do this. And the more we can be aware of what we're doing and be our own self-regulators, the better off all of us will be. So in conclusion, self-efficacy is a learned confidence that one's actions can be effective, or that one is competent to develop the needed skills for the situation at hand. And then the collective efficacy is that confidence placed in one's group. Not mentioned there, it's learned through those observed experiences, those firsthand experiences, verbal encouragement, and kind of mentoring. And then self-regulation is our ability to manage our actions toward that end of meeting our goals and abiding by one's moral principles and the standards of society. And of course, this is a trait that varies based on our external factors and internal factors. And then we justify our bad actions through convenient distortions such as those just mentioned on the previous slide.